Thank you, and it's fantastic to be here and to see so many people engaged in this conversation. I know when Tim and I worked at the Sustainable Development Commission and started talking about sustainable diets, I'm not sure we'd have quite got so many people in the room. But it's just testament to the recognition of how important this issue is, that so many people are engaged in the conversation. What I'm going to do is to tell you about eating better, why we came into existence, and what we're trying to do, and also what some of the opportunities and challenges are. So, Eating Better for a Fair, Green, Healthy Future was launched in July 2014, and we are a civil society initiative. We're a broad alliance of 43 organisations that have come together to demonstrate that shifting diets to more plant-based eating with less and better meating isn't just better for health, isn't just better for the environment and resource use. It's better for climate change, it's better for feeding animal welfare, it's better for feeding the world fairly, and importantly, in the context of jobs, it's also important for sustainable livelihoods and provides business opportunities. And going back, I think, to what Tara was talking about in our first session this morning, is we don't want to see this issue as just about one or the other. It's about all of them. And of course, a lot of organisations perhaps only work on part of that agenda, and that's fine. And that's why Eating Better has come together in order to create a space where wherever you fit into that picture, that there's space for you to join in this conversation. And we have a vision, which is what we ask people who are involved in to say that they agree with. Our vision is a world in which everyone values and has access to healthy, humane and sustainable diets. And high meat consuming countries and individuals have reduced their consumption in line with health recommendations and greenhouse gas reduction targets. And meat is produced humanely and sustainably, and its production provides sustainable livelihoods and environmental benefits. It's consumed in quantities consistent with good health and global resource use capacity. And that's kind of, encapsulates our vision and our why. So, as you can see, a lot of organisations involved, 43 supporting organisations and partner networks that span that breadth of issues that we're creating the space for the conversation in. So, just to say a little bit about why we came into existence, and it is to have the conversation about consumption. As Tim Benton said this morning, and so many policy issues that came out of the food security agenda are very much around that we must produce more food. Producing more food is going to be the answer. And a lot of the policies that came out of that, where it's things like we have an agri-tech strategy, very much about how we can produce food better, how we can do it sustainably. And, there's a lot in that argument. We're not at all saying that we shouldn't think about how to produce more food sustainably. But it's a myth to believe that the challenges of the world of feeding the population fairly and healthily and globally sustainably with 9 billion people by 2050 is going to be solved by simply trying to produce more food. We know that's not the case. The evidence is very clear about this. Certainly we need to address food waste, and I know we'll be having more conversations about food waste, I think, in the next session. But we also need to talk about something which actually politicians and even many of us find quite difficult, is talking about our consumption. It's always very easy to say they should be doing something. It's quite challenging to be saying, we should be doing something. And no one likes the word should, and I don't even like using it. But how do we engage people in this thinking about the way that we eat, and in particular what we eat, in a way that isn't finger-wagging, which is where the politicians often say, well, I can't possibly have this conversation because I can't tell people what to eat. And I'd like to say this isn't about telling people what to eat, but it is certainly about trying to create the conversation in order to be able to raise awareness. We've come together to try and do that, why we need to talk about a shift to more plant-based eating and less meat, And we heard very clearly the case for that this morning, and I'm not going to repeat the why. And it isn't just a nice to have, as Tim Benton said. It's something we need to get on with. It's not something that we can think, oh, one day, someday, when we've done all the research, that'll be very nice. No, it's an essential, something essential that we must address in the short term to ensure longer term sustainability. So the how, well, we need Eating Better's come together to be a force for change, to build support and lobbying muscle, to demonstrate to those who can help make a difference, whether that's policymakers and businesses, that the time is right to be having this conversation, to talk about how we can move towards healthy, sustainable diets, and particularly to talk about eating less meat. And that's the third area that I'm going to talk a bit more about in a moment, is about how we create those long-term cultural shifts, how we do engage people in behaviour change. And certainly our view of the world and changing behaviour, it isn't just about persuading individuals. I mean, if we had to wait till we raised the awareness of everybody on this, I'm afraid there wouldn't be enough time. And, I do find it very challenging. I've been talking to major retailers and they say, it isn't really on our customers' agenda. Yes, we know the evidence, but it's not on our customers' agenda, and we only do what they ask us to do. So it's a tricky one for us. And we have the same conversations with many policymakers. They say, well, the electorate aren't jumping up and down about this. This isn't a top of what they're saying is important to them. So can you really expect us to do something about it? Yes, we know the evidence too. So the challenge here, and I'd like us to talk perhaps a bit more about this, is that gap between the evidence, which we heard so very clearly this morning, and what's needed to create those shifts, whether it's by policymakers, by what business can do. So what communities can do, and the last session was great in being able to show the way that we can engage people in communities as well as talking to people within whatever circumstance they are about this as well. So it is a big challenge. But one that Eating Better has come together to seek to do that. And as I say, there reflects our three areas of focus: to influence government policy, to influence business practice, and to develop behaviour change strategy. And one of the reasons that Eating Better did come together, I'm often, and many others talk about, when talking about, say, government policy, is this lack of coherence. But if we look at the civil society organisation, it's very true to say that actually our environmental organisations weren't talking to public health organisations. So Eating Better has come together very much to address that kind of coherence within civil society organisations as well. And people like Friends of the Earth, who were very involved in helping set up Eating Better, as our WWF, commissioned City University to do some research to actually try and find out what some of the barriers were here. And it was very much around, we don't have a clear message. Government and business were saying they weren't having clear messages coming from civil society organisations. So one of the things that we spent quite a bit of time doing in setting up Eating Better is thinking about, what is our core message? How do we communicate this? And so that's really the concept of talking about less and better meat eating. By better, we mean meat that's produced in ways that is better for animal welfare, better for the environment, better for producers' livelihoods, better for health. It's a whole report Food Ethics Council did with WWF, looking at all the ways in which one could talk about better meat production. For those of you who say, what do you mean? Do take a look at that. And there's a whole movement that's around better meat, and that's really important. Grass-fed is very much talked about, pasture-based livestock having many benefits. I know the science around that is still being explored. But the evidence very clearly shows that you can't really have better without having the less. We just couldn't feed the world at current levels of meat consumption if we shifted to that. So just very quickly to run through some of the things that we're doing. Yes, we are seeking to influence policy making. We do have a policy ask paper that you can download from our website. First really important step, and it was great to hear about the Dutch experience this morning, is we would like to have some healthy and sustainable dietary guidelines in the UK. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask, and yet, we haven't managed to yet achieve that. We've had some great work that's been done, which Tara Garnett has co-chaired under DEFRA's auspices, which is the Green Food Project, looking at some guidelines for healthy and sustainable diets, and that is going to be published, I understand, fairly soon, but it's being published by a global food security body, not by the government itself. And so one of the challenges is how do we take this into Public Health England? How do we take this into the Department of Health? How do we take this into DEFRA so that actually a very reasonable ask could just be made to happen? Our dietary guidelines are something like 20 years old now, and there's all kinds of reasons why people are asking for them to be updated, whether that's in relation to sugar and carbohydrates, but certainly we would like to see sustainability integrated into those. It's not going to change the world overnight, but it is the guidance that comes with the weight of officialdom, official advice. I can stand here and say these things, but I don't come with any kind of weight like that at all, and even individual academics. What we need to see that is our UK official dietary guidance. Various people have talked about public sector food procurement, hugely important, and there's a lot of work going on in that area. Haven't got time to talk in detail about that, but it's really important how sustainability and healthy eating is incorporated there. We want to see government policies shifted towards more support for better farming. Certainly want to see European healthy and sustainable food policy a reality. Very disappointed that has not come out of there. We're involved in things like the Square Meal Report, which Tim and other organisations, we're one of 10 organisations that have come together to put together a whole kind of analysis and a suite of policy options in the run-up to the next election. And certainly those of you who are aware of things like TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Industry Partnership, big trade negotiations between Europe and the EU, will know of some of the concerns there are about that in relation to standards around animal welfare issues and food safety standards relating to meat. It's one of the problems with TTIP is it's all in secret, so we can raise our concerns, but it's very difficult to know how that's going to fall out. But of course, in the US, there's very different systems of agricultural and livestock production, and hormones and antibiotics, GMO issues as well. We've got blogs on our website if you'd like to know more about that. Tim's hurrying me along. Yes, sorry. Influencing business practice. That's another important area for us to be talking about. And showcasing good practice, and there are business opportunities. Certainly in the food catering sector, the feedback we're getting is, yes, they are interested in this. There are conversations going on there. And actually, cost issues are an important consideration. Less and better meat needn't cost more. We published a report just earlier this month called Let's Talk About Meat, and I'd really recommend that to you. You can see it on our website in the context of talking about behaviour change. We did a literature review. We looked at the evidence and found actually there's very little work being done on how we shift diets to less and better meat eating. And we identified 10 potential drivers for change. We really want to start engaging policymakers, researchers. We've got advice for business in there as well as to what are going to be the most likely ways to help people. What are their interests? How do we get around the challenges of habit, for example? And we've got a lot of recommendations in there. Really love your feedback on that. And we've started to look at actually what do people think about eating less and better meat. And surprisingly, well, a significant number are already interested, despite the fact that awareness on many of these issues is rather low. And I know Jenny in Aberdeen didn't find quite as much interest, whether that's Aberdeen versus the UK, I don't know. But, you know, I think we need more research in this area to really understand perhaps some of the geographical differences. And we've certainly identified gender as being an important difference here. Very interesting to hear about the Fife diet is mainly women involved in that. I want to talk about men and meat, and I'd love men to join in this conversation. So very quickly to my last slide. What do I think are some of the challenges and opportunities? So I do think there's a policy blockage at the moment, both here in the UK and the EU. And as many of us have talked about today, the challenge of coherence and integration. We do need to do much more, and Eating Better wants to engage people in understanding how to have the conversation with people in a way that's positive. And I think for us, at Eating Better, we spent much of our first year establishing the case for why do we need to look at this. Our emphasis is going to be now on the how. How do we create that change? What's going to make it easy for people to shift to healthy, sustainable diets with less and better meat eating? And I think as very important in that is creating a new narrative. How do we do that? That's my contact details. If you're involved in an organisation that's not already part of Eating Better, whether that's at a national or a local level, we'd love to have you on board. Do take a look at our website and you can find out how to do that. So thank you very much.